There's one part of a watch that almost nobody talks about, and yet it does determine how the watch wears, how it looks on your wrist, and whether you actually enjoy owning it. It's not the dial, it's not even the movement, but it's actually the lugs. Today, I'm going to walk you through why lugs matter using my own collection to break down the different designs, the engineering behind them, and how they completely change your experience with a watch. And by the end of this, you're never going to look at case diameter the same way again. At a technical level, lugs are the structural extensions of the watch case that secure the strap or bracelet, usually through spring bars or screws. But functionally, they do three critical things. First, they define how the watch actually sits when it's on your wrist. Second, they determine strap compatibility. What will and won't work with your watch because of the lugs makes a big difference. And third, they shape the entire visual identity of the watch. Now, my name is James. I'm a watch enthusiast, I'm a watch collector, and also an advisor. And I want you to know and love your watches. So if you appreciate this type of content, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel because you'll see new videos from me every single week on these types of topics. Now with that, let's jump into the topic today of lug design. Now there are three measurements that you need to understand. First is your lug width. That's going to be your strap or bracelet size. Second is lug to lug, and that is the real size of the watch on your wrist when you measure from here to here. And third, the lug curvature. This is what determines the comfort. Do you have a flat case back, or do you have some level of curvature to the lug profile? You can have two watches with the same case diameter that wear completely differently. And the reason for that, it all comes down to the lugs. Let's start with wearability, because this is where things get real. Now take my Rolex Sky-Dweller here. There's no question that this is a large watch. But what really defines how it wears is the lug structure. The lugs are broad, relatively flat, and they extend outward with a strong horizontal stance. That gives the watch a lot of presence, but it also means the watch wears larger than the diameter might suggest. Now let's compare that to the Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Enamel. Completely different philosophy around lug design here. The lugs here are slim, they're sharply tapered, and they curve downward towards the wrist. So even though this is still a substantial watch in terms of complications, it wears incredibly compact. That curvature of the lugs pulls the case into your wrist instead of letting it sit on top of it. This is why lug to lug matters a lot more than actual case diameter, because your wrist isn't flat, and the lugs decide whether the watch conforms or fights against it. Now let's talk about strap compatibility, because lugs are the gateway to versatility. When you've got a watch with a standard lug width like 20, 21, 22 millimeters, it makes it really easy to swap straps. But beyond that, design choices start to matter as well. Some watches have drilled lugs, making strap changes quick and safe. Others hide the holes for a cleaner look, but make strap changes a little more delicate. And then you have some watches that completely ignore traditional lug design. Take this Omega Seamaster Ploprof 1200 meter in summer blue. This is a perfect example of function over tradition. This Ploprof doesn't rely on conventional lugs at all. Instead, the case and the bracelet system are integrated into a purpose-built structure designed for extreme depth and durability. You're not swapping straps casually here. This is engineering first and versatility second. Now let's get into the design language of lugs, because this is where lugs become art. Now first, we're going to talk about straight lugs, or lugs that really aren't there at all. These are going to be clean, linear, and often more utilitarian, like some of Omega's models, unlike this one, which again has really no lug structure at all. They typically extend outward with minimal curvature and give the watch a more tool-oriented or vintage feel. Then you have curved or tapered lugs. And this is where elegance comes into the picture. Again, look at this Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Enamel. These lugs taper beautifully and curve down towards the wrist, creating both comfort and refinement. Next, something a little more sculptural. Let's look at the Seiko SLGA017, part of their Evolution 9 case design. Now this is where case architecture and lug design start to blend together a bit. The lugs here aren't just functional, they're actually a canvas Seiko uses for its finishing. You have these sharp transitions and distortion-free surfaces that you notice have that unmistakable Zaratsu polishing. And importantly, those crisp edges rely on the geometry of the lugs to exist. Then we move into something with a little more classical restraint. The Girard-Perregaux 1966 Orion is a perfect example of this. Here the lugs are understated, very slim, very elegant, and very balanced when it comes to the contrast with the case. They don't draw attention to themselves, but they do help complete the look of the watch. This is traditional watchmaking design, where the lugs support the dial instead of competing with it. And then there's independent design language as well. The Dan Reuter DR02 brings a completely different perspective here. Independents often use lugs as a way to establish identity. More angular, more experimental, sometimes even more architectural. Because when you're not bound by some legacy design code that's existed forever, the lugs can also be a place where you can innovate. Now let's zoom in a bit, because lugs are one of the best places to evaluate finishing quality. Let's look at some transitions, where brushed surfaces meet polished bevels, and where flat planes meet sharp edges. On the Seiko here, those transitions are razor sharp, and that is not an easy thing to do. Maintaining perfectly flat surfaces with distortion-free polishing requires extreme precision, and that lug geometry makes it possible to do. Even on the Rolex Sky-Dweller, you see a somewhat different approach. Broader surfaces with softer transitions. There's more emphasis here on durability and consistency. And every brand expresses its philosophy in some way, shape, or form through the design of its lugs. Now, historically, lugs started as purely functional, like most things with watches. Early trench watches used wire lugs, literally welded onto the case to hold the strap. We've come a long way since then. And as watchmaking evolved into the mid-20th century, lugs became more expressive. Longer, sculpted, more stylized, and today we see everything from traditional curved lugs to fully integrated designs, as you've seen some of today. The evolution of lugs mirrors the evolution of watchmaking itself, from tool to object to identity. So when I look at some of my collection, I don't just see different watches, I also see different philosophies of lug design. Again, the Rolex Sky-Dweller, bold, structured, and commanding. The JLC Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Enamel, refined, curved, and elegant in so many ways. Seiko Evolution 9 design, precision, so much finishing, and a ton of geometry packed into one case. The Girard-Perregaux 1966 Orion, just classic restraint through and through. The Omega Seamaster Ploprof 1200 meter, pure function, that's it. And the Dan Reuter DR02, independent creativity at its finest. And here's the takeaway. If you want to understand how a watch will wear, don't start with the case diameter, start with the lugs. Because that's actually where the watch will meet your wrist. And once you start paying attention to that, you'll start making much better decisions as a collector. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, take a look at my last week's video where I talk about anti-reflective coating and how much you notice it when you're looking at the crystal on a watch. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please do like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.